We've seen a slight demise in France over the last couple of years. Bernard, I've heard you speak about maybe the over-reliance on talent, and maybe a lack of professionalism on an individual level within the top 14, and it might be leaking through to the national side. I suppose, how far behind do you think they are in terms of their own professional?
I'd say they're a long way behind. I'd say they're 50%, behind in terms of modern sports science. Real clear talent ID programs, player development, screening, and understanding, and a clear alignment between the national side and the top 14 clubs. I mean, that was officially the reason Guy Noves was sacked, because he hadn't actually spoken to a lot of the top 14 coaches over a 2-year period, which is madness. They're the coaches who are producing players for you, and you need to have a really good handle on your depth chart, who's in form, who's out of form, who's injured, when are they back, etc. And they just haven't had that clarity. And the problem in France is that the top 14 as an organisation, the LNR who run the top 14 are a much stronger body financially than the French Federation, whereas obviously SRU, WRU, IRFU, RFU are massively more powerful. Well, the English clubs are powerful, but the RFU have got a serious amount of financial power behind them, and they've managed to do a really good deal with the clubs to keep them on board. And that's the big issue, is politics in France. I mean, they do produce phenomenal players, but if they're not week to week in a club like Clermont or I don't know, Montpellier potentially now with Vern Cotter, etc., where they're getting really good detail and feedback around their performance. They've got a strong game plan that's testing and extending and stretching their skill set. Well, then it's hard to step up at international level. So you'll have a performance like against Ireland where they come out with a lot of passion, and the weather probably contains Ireland a little bit, and they have a huge performance, but you won't get anything consistent, and that's the big issue. So I think they're a long way behind. The under-20s group this year are very good. They're an exceptional group, but the problem is, will they get game time in top 14 where all the coaches are under pressure? There's a hell of a amount of foreign players, and that's the big thing. So there's been good under-20s who've come out before and just disappeared into the black hole of French rugby. So I think they're a long way away, and I think they'll struggle to get back on track or be a real top 5 team until the clubs understand that they have an obligation to produce players for the national team. Everything there is very local. If you want if you're from Tullow, for example, in the south of France, you're obsessed about Tullow winning, and you're actually not really that bothered about France, the national team, and they give out about it on a Monday, but it's forgotten about by Tuesday. Whereas if Clermont lose or Montpellier lose or Bordeaux lose, there's hell to pay until the next game, and they're very local. Whereas I think we all support a province, but we've a massive passion and interest in our national side. That's not the case in France, and that until that changes as well, the whole ethos and emphasis of the players as well, because they go to French camp knowing that it's not probably the biggest thing in the country that weekend, and that's a very rare. If you play for the All Blacks, Wallabies, Ireland, Wales, it's the biggest event in rugby circles that weekend or maybe of the year. Whereas for them, some of their club games are more important a little bit.
Like that, you mentioned that 20s group. Is that just sheer numbers?
Yeah.
Because like we talk about the RFU, one thing they do well, in fairness, and have done increasingly well, is the development pathways. They're getting onto guys now 15, 16 out of areas that haven't previously played rugby, so they're doing that really well. I sometimes wonder if French rugby really even has like a structure to get to that.
No, they don't, but they rely on the top 14 or Pro D2 clubs. But the reality is that head coach who's coaching at a top 14 level will never benefit from that 16-year-old. Whereas if you have somebody in each club whose job is solely around player development, at some stage he'll get recognition or credit, or he'll survive in his job because he brought through 216s from his region who played for France in their 20s and hopefully play for the club. Whereas the head coaches are they're so insecure in their job, they're only worried about next weekend, or the weekend after. So whereas in Ireland, you know, you look at how David Nusafora and Joe and the RFU and potentially Joe control the recruitment process. Everything is around, okay, well, where's there a gap in our succession plan? You know, so Ruan Pinar is obviously the easiest example to use. You know, you got John Cooney and Connacht behind or competing with Kieran Marmion. We can move John Cooney or encourage John Cooney to move to Ulster, and now suddenly he's getting game time week in, week out, and he's a real contender to be in the Irish squad. You know, that would never happen in France. There's you know, Guy Noves or Brunel or Laporte cannot ring up a top 14 club and say, listen, there's a Intermac's son, Emile Intermac's son, who's a talented 20-year-old. He's not getting game time at Toulouse at the moment. You know, can he go to Bordeaux for 6 months on a loan deal? That would not happen. And until that happens, they're going to have talent that's just sitting behind